For my NCTE Excellence in Poetry winner, I chose to read How I Discovered Poetry by Marilyn Nelson, illustrations by Hadley Hooper. And while we're on the topic of illustrations, it's unique in the account that most of them are very small, and if they're in color, they're either in blue or yellow. We do have an occasional picture that is of Marilyn, and as Marilyn notes in the back of the book, she did some additional research about the time. So as we can see, some of these poems are not illustrated here. If it does have color besides blue, we also see yellow to highlight the information that's important. In this case, we have the bell. And when her mother is a teacher, that's highlighted as well. This poetry book contains 50 various poems about Maryland and or the time period from the early 1950s to the 1960s, which is a great introduction to poetry for students in about the age range of 8 through 12. We get to see the historical background, which has Mississippi's Emmett Till's hanging and lynching there, to have the first Negro woman on the bus. We have bomb drills with the hydrogen bomb that she also includes within the book here. There's a lot of talking about being the first Negro to do various things throughout the period of time. Her mom was one of the first Negro teachers on the Air Force Base where they lived. And speaking of the Air Force Base, goes to the setting. Her dad was an officer, which was unique at the time. And we get to see how that affects Maryland of not having very many, as they put in the poetry listed here, Negro friends or family members throughout the time. From the age about 4 to 14, they moved several times, whether in Texas, Kansas, California, New Hampshire, when her dad is restationed during, of course, the Red Scare and Eisenhower's administration. The interactions that we see through these characters do follow the times of segregation. Her mom even, interestingly enough, points out when she comes to the Air Force Base in Kansas, don't like them more than you like your own people. So we see both sides of segregation in that regard as well. Students would be able to benefit from reading from this book because at some point in time we see the loss of friendship, which she does have throughout this book with all the traditional movements of a military family, and then acquiring the friendship again when that family gets restationed at a similar base, or at the same base I should say rather, and then losing again during to restations. We also can see the loss and the transitions of moving over and over again. It's unique that at somewhere within her poems, Marilyn puts in of their living conditions and what that looks like throughout the time. Most children at this age point would have experienced at least a move or a loss of a friendship, so this could be a nice reflection of how poetry can emulate their life. And so a nice corresponding activity that could go along with this book would be to have students write a poem. Now, Marilyn had chose to write her poems in the forms of sonnets. Not necessarily would this children have to write sonnets, but they could write about an experience of the difficulty of transitioning at that point in time in their life, whether it's a loss of their friend, movement, death, and then compile it as a whole classwork. So once again, this was How I Discovered Poetry, which was thankfully to a teacher from Marilyn Nelson.